And it is Denver Sports Tonight on this Tuesday night in the Mile High City. He's James Merilatt. I'm Will Petersen. We will roll with you for the next hour on a busy day in Broncos country because it's Combine Day. During the regular season, James, we get used to hearing from these guys every single week. During the offseason, it sort of feels like a special treat. We got to hear for Sean Payton 20 minutes today, George Payton 10. That ratio feels about right to me.
Yes, it does. It was a half hour, and it was 2/3, 1/3. That sounds about right. It had been, we heard from him like a week after the final regular season game, which was roughly, January 7th, something like that. That was the last game. So we hadn't heard from him in a month and a half. It had been 5 or 6 weeks. It was good to hear some of the updates. Not a lot has happened, right? They haven't made a decision on Russell Wilson. At the end of the season presser, Sean said, hey, we haven't even had these conversations yet. Then at the Super Bowl, he said, we'll start those meetings on Monday.
I don't even know the jersey numbers of these guys.
I haven't done anything. I mean, it's like, what the heck have you been doing for a month?
That beach must have been nice.
Which, there probably was a little bit of that, and it probably was necessary. Go decompress. Go think about something other than football for a while. Nobody believes that. But now they're in the midst of it. Now they're at the Combine. You got to know a little bit of what you're thinking and what the plan is and who you're looking for and all the rest of that before you show up there. So he couldn't get up there and completely BS his way through. I don't know any of these guys, and we don't have a plan. We haven't had those conversations. We found out today that they have an idea what they're going to do.
They do have an idea what they're going to do. So Sean told folks they're going to have a decision on Russ probably in the next week or so, and then he changed that to 2 weeks. And that's really not that much news because they have to have it by March 17th, which is 2.5, 3 weeks away. So by telling us, hey, it's going to be in the next 2 weeks, they're saying we're going to meet that deadline. But did Sean tip his hand on his next answer, particularly when it comes about getting this decision right when it comes to finding the quarterback? Oh, this next one doesn't have a line through it. The guy in the meme was drinking the Kool-Aid. Sean might have been drinking a couple of lattes this morning, James, because he said it today, tipped his hand, the next quarterback, meaning Russ is getting crossed out. We're starting to look like the Cleveland Browns jersey, and he's got to get the next one right.
Yeah, I think he certainly tipped his hand of what he's thinking. I think he probably tipped the hand of what the organization is thinking and what they're going to do. And, yeah, it wasn't, hey, we got to make sure whoever our quarterback is next year is right. It was the next one. That tells you it ain't the current one. That's not hard to connect those dots, and I think that was a little bit of a slip by the head coach. I think it was, part of being one of the morning pressers. Maybe you aren't as sharp as possible. I mean, that wasn't exactly a, snappy clip we had there from Sean as he stumbled his way through that answer in that story.
I know, but I appreciate the way that it got cut up was how he said it. Because sometimes people edit these things together to make these guys sound a little more coherent than they are. No, that was the exact answer he gave at the podium today in Indy.
Yeah, I think he needed a couple more lattes to get himself going this morning. But I think he tipped his hand. He also talked about, though, that they're going to have a meeting with ownership. Right, and they're going to sit down and decide what they're going to do. So you and I have talked about this before. The whole kerfuffle about whether or not he was going to move the guarantee, Russell Wilson was going to move the guarantee, the date of when 2025 money became guaranteed, which is March 17th. We never knew where they wanted him to move it. I've put forth that it's probably something like May 1st. Like, get through free agency, get through the draft. If you don't get a guy that you want to replace him, then you probably just have Russell Wilson on the roster the next 2 years and you pay him and you guarantee it. They wanted to be able to get through that time and find that out. Now, they're going to have to guess. Free agency will have started. They ain't getting a free agent quarterback that's going to be the answer. They don't have the financial means to do it. They won't know what's going on in the draft, but they'll come home from Indianapolis at the end of this week with a pretty good idea of what's going to happen.
Right, and Sean Payton says the next guy, and I heard Zach and Phil talking about this on the drive, of has he already fallen in love with someone? Because maybe at the Super Bowl he can tell us, I don't even know their jersey numbers. But you know what Sean Payton has on Saturdays? He's got a television in his hotel room on the road or at home after walkthroughs. I guarantee he knows who these dudes are, and he's watched them on TV, and he's probably watched them on TV multiple times. So not only do you think they'll have a better idea after Indy, Zach raised the question, I raised the question, he may already know. And this may be a formality if we're being honest about it.
Well, I think he probably does. Listen, do I think a guy who wants to move on from Russell Wilson's willing to eat $85 million in dead cap hasn't looked at the rookie quarterback class to see who he wants? No, I don't believe that for a second, right? And I'm not the biggest Sean Payton fan in the world, and I don't think he's just fallen down on the job to that point. I think he certainly has looked at him. He probably knows, hey, I love J.J. McCarthy. That's my guy. Does he think he can get him at 12? That's the question. Like, that's what you're going to come home from Indianapolis with of, well, what does everybody else think of him? How is it kind of lining up? Is it, hey, we're going to have to trade up to the top 8 to get the guy we love? Are we willing to do that? And if they decide we can't get our guy at 12 or we're willing to move where we need to get our guy, then Russell Wilson's a goner. If they realize only guy we love is Caleb Williams, we have to get to 1 to get Caleb Williams, we are not willing to give up 3 first-round picks for that, then Russell Wilson might still be in Denver. Maybe. We'll see. But that's what they're going to come home and decide. And it also comes down to Greg Penner. Greg Penner could sit down and go, hey, Sean, I get it. You love J.J. McCarthy. I ain't eating this money, dude. Go figure it out. There's still that possibility. I wrote that a week ago. Greg Penner needs to show who's the boss. I'm still holding out hope that he's going to.
James, he's talking today about they already crossed out Russ, and they're going to make sure the next guy isn't getting crossed out.
He's crossed him out.
I think it's pretty clear Greg Penner has given Sean Payton full control of this organization.
Well, they're having a meeting to talk about what they're going to do. They ain't having a meeting to talk about what they're doing with Bolsey.
I think that's more of a check-in than I'm going to tell you what's next. Greg Penner has said many a times, I am not picking the football players on this team.
I get it.
He said that in his opening intro presser.
I get it. He's not making the selection at 12. He's not in there deciding who's their 4th-round pick that he saw down at the Senior Bowl. He ain't doing that. He is going to go in there and say, hey, this guy hasn't played a single down of the $245 million extension I gave him. I ain't eating that. I'm not.
Well, they're not eating all 245, but
I get it.
I see what you're saying, that the businessman in him probably cringes at this a little bit.
He has to.
You mentioned the possibility of trading up. George Payton was asked about that today, maybe even getting as high as 1 for Caleb Williams. Here's what George said. So I think George is pouring cold water on the theory that they're going to make this big, crazy move.
Correct.
I think what you said makes more sense. If you fall in love with McCarthy and you got to get from 12 to 8, you can probably pull that off. But you can sit at home and say, Patrick Mahomes 2.0, that's Caleb Williams. You can't get him. It's just it's not living in reality to think you can get to 1.
Well, and part of the reason it's not, they have the draft capital. Like, they could make the same trade that the Niners made to go from 12 to 3 to get Trey Lance, right?
Unless Chicago says he's Patrick Mahomes 2.0, he's not for sale. That's the only scenario.
And then he's not going to they're not going to move off that no matter what, nor should they. Theoretically, they could. But the fact that they've traded so many picks for Russ, so many picks for Sean, I just don't see him doing it again, where it's like, man, now we've made 3 big deals. We've traded away 6 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, 3 players to get Russell Wilson, Sean Payton, and the quarterback that we like. Like, well, who else is on the roster now? We don't have any picks. Like, what they've done up to this point, I think prohibits them from making that blockbuster trade more than draft capital. I just don't buy that. So he also, though, I do think there's the realistic possibility of moving from like 12 to 8 or something like that. But he sounded like they were a team open for business for moving the other direction.
Let's hear that. Yeah, laying the groundwork. You wrote about it at denversports.com today. George Payton hints at a possible disappointing offseason in Broncos country. I want you to elaborate why you went with that, and especially because that is a man who totally shot down trading up and sounded like, hey, GM's in the 20s, give me a call because I need a second-round pick too.
Yeah, easier to trade down. I mean, there's 12 to 15 guys that are really good. You should trade to our spot. Basically what he was saying. He was putting out the ad in the classifieds there of call us. We're looking for a trade partner. He also reiterated, and he said this in the end of the season press conference as well, that they ain't going to be spending big in free agency this year. And last year they spent $240-some million, more than, at least that was the total value of the contracts, way more than anybody else in the league. They were the number one spenders, the first offseason with the Walton Penner family ownership group at the helm, and he's gone out of his way twice now to let everybody know that's not going to happen this year.
Well, let's hear from the man himself today on that. I mean, this cracks me up so much. We can't do that every year because the guy at the podium who's saying we can't do that every year put you in this position. Again, I don't like continually calling for George Payton's job, but I find it hilarious that there's this golly gee, whoa, shucks, we don't have any money because of George Payton. That's why you don't have any money. That's why you don't have any cap flexibility, yet he remains a prominent member of Broncos country. And the soundbite bothered me at the end of the season pressers, and it bothered me today because it's me sitting here going, wow, I wonder why, George.
It feels to me like the dad who's telling you it's going to be kind of a lean Christmas because he lost at the track.
Right.
Right? Like,
right.
You're the one that lost at the track, dude.
That was your Christmas last year, so it's going to double as your Christmas this year.
Right. Like, come on. It's funny you say that because I had the exact same comment to Rachel today on Coffee Break of like, really? Like, well, yeah, part of the reason is because you're the one who decided to go Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers, who were fine. They were fine. But they gave him huge money in free agency. They wanted, and there were guys who were road graders, supposedly. They're run blockers first, and they couldn't run the football this year. They couldn't. Like, that was the biggest problem with the offense. They couldn't run the football or just didn't even try to.
Yeah, or a different conversation for a different day. Was it the O-line or was it the backs?
Sure. Yeah. But it's like, well, okay, so those weren't good investments. Randy Gregory. I mean, DJ Jones is a nice player, but is he great?
He's not Aaron Donald.
Is he a difference maker?
Not a game changer.
They gave him a ton of money. I mean, who's been the hit in free agency that George Payton has had?
I mean, not Zach Allen. There were stretches this year where they would go for a month and I would forget that Zach Allen played for the Broncos.
Yeah, was he an upgrade from Draymond Jones?
Not really.
No.
Or, well, Draymond post-Bradley Chubb trade when he got all sad and pouty and took his ball and went home. Okay. But not pre-Bradley Chubb trade when he was balling out.
Okay, but it's like, yeah, I mean, the guy who's made a ton of bad investments is telling you, sorry, we're not gonna be able to make any more investments because we've already spent our money. It's like, that's a tough pill to swallow. Now, if it was a new GM who was coming in and basically was like, look, the last guy overspent and made a bunch of bad investments and we got to get those off the books, okay. You'd kind of feel sorry for him and you'd give him a little bit of a grace period. But, yeah, there's no grace period for George Payton. It's like, okay, dude, well, you had last year to go spend and basically had a blank check, and you didn't improve the team enough to get him to a winning season yet again.
It's kind of tough as a Broncos fan. It is, because he made the worst trade in NFL history, or one of the worst 3 trades in NFL history. He hired Nathaniel Hackett, which was a total disaster, and he gave Russ $250 million before he ever played a snap, and yet he's still sitting here at the Combine with the keys to the cash register telling us the direction of our favorite football team. It's tough for fans to swallow.
It is. It was a bit of a depressing day as a Broncos fan, right? So you find out they're not going to spend in free agency. They're probably not going to trade up, right? Both of which reality tells you they're not going to spend big in free agency. Okay, but as a fan, you don't want to hear that. Not trading up and trading back is probably actually the more prudent move, and long-term probably makes sense, but it doesn't get you excited.
Well, and I've still said if it's not a round 1 QB, Broncos country already ticked off is going to be just flabbergasted.
Well, it's going to be you, me, and KJ down on the hill for training camp.
Exactly.
That's it.
I mean, if you take a We've seen a lot of mock drafts with this Terry and Arnold, this corner out of Alabama. If you take another corner out of Alabama, how does Broncos country going to feel about that? Not that Pat Surtain hasn't been a good player, but corners don't impact the game the way the quarterback does, or even a skill position player on offense can. If you go in a span of 3 years, corner out of Alabama, wide receiver out of Alabama, another corner out of Alabama, none of them are lighting the world on fire, Broncos country is going to go, I don't think it's cool that we drafted players from Alabama.
That's your last 3 first-round picks.
Because they had to take the 2 years off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be nothing but Alabama guys. And look, Pat Surtain is a great player. He's arguably the best cornerback in football. Tell me the play Pat Surtain made this year that changed the game. I can tell you one that cost them the playoffs. 23-23, 3rd and 4, under 2 minutes to go on Christmas Eve, and he gets beat.
And it's hard because, like I said at the start, corners rarely make plays that change games. Like, that's why Aqib Talib was so special, because it felt like once a month he was getting you a pick six, But in this day and age, if they take another corner because they go, well, we need a number 2 corner. Okay, then who's throwing the football? Who's scoring the football? Are you trying to win games 3-0? Because that's not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable.
And you can't cover NFL receivers for 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, right? Like, so a great cornerback only gets a chance to be great if your pass rush is worth a hoot. So it all works hand in hand. I mean, part of the reason Aqib Talib and Chris Harris Jr. were as good as they were is because you had Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, Derek Wolfe, Malik Jackson putting pressure on the quarterback, right? And you could get pressure with 4. So then there's 7 guys in coverage when you have to blitz and you got 6 or 7 guys going after the quarterback and you're still not getting there. You don't have a shot. Now, that's the biggest play of the year. Wasn't that way. That was a bang-bang play, and he just got beat. And I'm not beating Pat Surtain up for that. Like, no corner bats 1,000. But the point is, tell me the big play he made.
I don't have one off the top of my head.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
Right? It's largely the big plays he made were, hey, they didn't throw the ball to Devontae Adams much during that game, so it goes unnoticed. I get that. A lot of his great work is kind of anonymous.
But they still lost to the Raiders twice. So that kind of puts the cherry on top of my original point. Don't take another corner. Please, take a quarterback in round 1.
Well, and if they don't, that means the quarterbacks this year in training camp are going to be Jarrett Stidham, Sam Darnold.
Yep, Journeyman X. So call it Darnold, call it Minshew, call it Taylor Heineke.
Reclamation project, right? And it's like, okay, you're basically trying to bridge to next year when you're going to have a higher pick because you're going to be awful this year and you'll take a quarterback.
Or just to play devil's advocate, say Michael Penix Jr. takes a tumble to the 2nd or 3rd round.
That's your only saving grace. Is that the medicals force a guy that in between the semifinal game and the championship game.
Oh, he was hot.
We were all saying, is he going to be there at 12?
Right.
And now it's like, he's definitely, Cecil and Mace came back from the Senior Bowl saying he's out of the 1st round. I've seen guys go on national shows saying he may not get drafted, which is preposterous to me. Who wouldn't spend a day 3 pick on that guy? I don't care what his medical said. It's worth the gamble, right? It's a player that probably isn't going to make your roster anyway, so you might as well take the flyer on him. That's the one saving grace is if they get him in early day 3 or late day 2. Okay, that might get people excited.
Right, because we've heard a lot about Michael Pratt out of Tulane. People don't know who Michael Pratt is. No one in Denver was watching Tulane football on a regular basis this year, but they were watching Michael Penix in the Pac-12 championship game in the national semifinal. He didn't have a great national championship, obviously, but that's the thing is, we say, okay, 3rd-round quarterback. If it's Michael Pratt, like you said, there's dozens of people on the hill. If it's Michael Penix Jr., that actually would get Broncos country a little bit excited.
Yeah, but nobody's going to be excited to go down there and watch somebody process.
They don't know who Michael Pratt is.
I'm so sick of this narrative that is out there now that everybody, he's all about a processor. Needs a guy that's a good processor. Okay, yeah, when Javonte gets stuffed on 1st and 2nd down, it's 3rd and 8, and you have 1.1 seconds to throw because they can't block anybody. Process away, kid. This is the most overhyped storyline. Give me a guy that makes plays, right? Like, I'm not saying Patrick Mahomes isn't a great processor. I'm not. But he's the best quarterback in football. He's won 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
If you were listing his best attributes, being a good processor isn't in the top 5. His ability to make plays off schedule, buy time, move in the pocket, improvise, like all of those things are up there. His big arm, He can scramble and get a first down with his legs if he has to. Standing in the pocket and processing through 1, 2, 3, 4 progressions. Find me the obvious passing downs this year that the Broncos had where anybody would have stood back and done that. What is he going to do? Process, oh, there's Jerry and Cortland running into each other in the middle of the field on third down. Process away, kid. I'm over that storyline too.
All right, so let's go big picture from these press conferences today. Again, Sean Payton talked for 20 minutes. George Payton talked for 10 up at the Combine in Indianapolis. The only time we'll hear from them next will be the owners' meetings, and then we'll hear from them after the draft is over. What was your overwhelming takeaway from today? And now that speaking of processing, now that you've had time to process everything you listened to this morning.
They're moving on from Russ. I mean, that's the number one story. And it's going to be a lackluster, underwhelming offseason. And look, that's okay. You don't win games in March and April, right? You could argue they won the offseason last year, especially free agency.
Spent the most money of anyone by a mile. I think it was more than $100 million.
And they went 8-9 and missed the playoffs for an 8th straight season. So it's like, okay. But when you're not winning games and you're not making the playoffs, winning the offseason at least feels kind of fun. And they ain't winning the offseason this year.
Last offseason was exciting.
Yeah.
And so was the offseason before it. And then Russ went 11-19 in his 30 starts. But the 2022 offseason, obviously, with the trade was thrilling. You know, and the billboards and you and I walking into training camp behind Sierra and her security guards.
Yeah.
We're like, this is cool.
Sierra waving at me when we're in the tent.
I mean, Case Keenum didn't have security guards. Joe Flacco didn't have security guards.
No.
So that was fun. But then they went 5-12. And then last offseason, they spent $244 million, and they go 8-9, and they're going to have to break up with their quarterback. So while I'm with you that it was a depressing day, that was the word you used, maybe just a totally different offseason is what Broncos country needs, because the last two have been totally full of hype, and they've fallen flat on their face.
But that's not a plan, Will. It's not.
It's like George Costanza.
Exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Everything we've done is wrong, so we're going to do 180 degrees from it. That's not a plan. And that's my biggest issue with this organization at the moment. If you wanted to sell me on blow it up and rebuild, fine. Then why did you hire Sean Payton? He's not a rebuild coach. He's a win-now coach. Why didn't you trade away assets and stockpile picks at the deadline last year? So they keep trying to be in two different lanes at once, and we thought that was a John Elway problem, right? I want to win now, and I want to win from now on, or whatever his saying was.
That was the quote. I want to win from now and now on. That and there's no plan B were his two most famous quotes.
And you're stuck with 1 foot in each lane, and you're not doing a very good job of either one of them. That's my issue with what they're doing now. Like, okay, what is the plan other than to just do the opposite of what they've done in the past? That doesn't instill confidence in me. It doesn't.
All right, we'd appreciate if you help us grow our Denver Sports YouTube channel. Go ahead and like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Denver Sports on YouTube. Check it out. A lot of great content up there, specifically with Cecil Lammy, Rachel Vigil, Andrew Mason, and the rest of our team. Coming up next.